have our next presentation, a call to action by Senator Marilou McPhedran. So Senator McPhedran is a human rights lawyer, professor, and activist, appointed as an independent senator in the Parliament of Canada by Governor General David Johnston on the recommendation of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in November 2016. Marilou was one of the most influential leaders of the 1981 Ad Hoc Committee of Canadian Women on the Constitution Conference, the grassroots social movement of women across Canada, resulting in stronger equality rights in the Constitution. Actually, if you go to level 3, I think, of the Human Rights Museum, by the Garden of Contemplation, if you just walk through the path, you'll find a room full of materials and that cool game that you can play based on the Constitution. And if you look on the exhibit walls, you'll actually find Senator McPhedran's notebook from that time on the charter negotiations. So it's a really cool thing you can find. Also, she attended the ICANN Nuclear Ban Forum and the first, second, and third meetings of state parties to the TPNW, and continues to strongly advocate for the Canadian government to sign the TPNW. She also has been a huge supporter of the summit since 2019, attending all 5 summits. She also launched the Youth Parliament Nuclear Summit in Ottawa that took place on November 2023 and February 2025.
Allô, bonjour, Tanzi. Je voudrais parler en français et après ça en anglais. En tant que sénatrice indépendante du Manitoba, je reconnais que je vis sur le territoire du traité 1, le territoire traditionnel des Anishinaabe, des Cris, des Ojibwe, des Dakota et des Denis, et la patrie de la nation métisse de la Rivière-Rouge. Je tiens à souligner que le Parlement du Canada est situé sur un territoire algonquin, Anishinaabe, non cédé et non restitué. I want to repeat that last line in English because the Parliament of Canada is where I work, and it is where all of you have elected representatives that are serving in our Parliament who have a primary responsibility to you, to the citizens of Canada. And sometimes I feel like I have to remind all of us of that there is an accountability, there is a responsibility that every single parliamentarian, whether they are in the House of Commons as elected members of Parliament, or whether, like me, they are in the Senate of Canada as those who are appointed to serve. And I think that the statement, the Parliament of Canada, is located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe First Nations, is a very powerful representation of this country and what it means to actually build a true pathway to reconciliation. We are all immigrants if we have not come from First Nations in this country. And it is critical that we go beyond something like the land acknowledgement that I just gave, to go beyond words. And part of what is so powerful in the world about the movements to respond to the dire threat of nuclear weapons for our entire civilization, our entire planet, is that many of the leaders in this movement, and many of those, like we've heard so eloquently from Casey just a moment ago, are people of Indigenous origin. They have paid a terrible price for the use and the testing of nuclear weapons. Here in Winnipeg, I want to spend time with you today to talk about action. You've had very important, packed full of information, presentations here today, and it's kind of challenging not to experience it as frightening and kind of depressing, because it is a very serious threat. We are facing the closest to the midnight clock of nuclear devastation than we've ever been. Those are facts. They're part of what you will walk away with today, and many of you who've been here before came here today with the understanding that for young people around the world, there is a very real possibility that you will see the ending of the world and experience the ending or devastation, massive devastation in your lifetimes. So I want to treat that as information we have. And then, because we're human, because humans always have failings, but also humans always find a place for hope. And many humans find a way to take action, find a way not to be overwhelmed by the negativity, which, while it is the truth, it is part of the truth. Because every crisis creates opportunities. And it's up to us, because I want to be very clear with you. Every time I'm with a group of young people, for me, every single one of you in this room is a leader, is a young leader. Not of tomorrow, as our previous Prime Minister was fond of saying, but today, now. And much of what we have to do together, across generations. And so part of what I want to do is really recognize who is in this room. Because when humans take action, we take action effectively together. Many of us, if we're studying history or we're reading even the local media, current media, we see an assumption of what is often seen as a singular, heroic model of leadership. If only we had this particular leader, they could fix things. You know, that's not what history actually tells us. Yes, we do need strong, visionary, courageous leadership at the head of governments. But we also have to acknowledge that no single person can make the kind of changes or take the kind of action that we need to be looking at as we face the nuclear winter. And it's here, in Winnipeg, in Buhler Hall, in the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, that we have led not only the country. There is no other gathering on this scale, on a regular basis, an annual basis, anywhere in the world. And you are part of this. You are making the success of this. And so, how did we get here and where do we go from here? Well, much of this starts with Rotary, as my dear friend and parliamentarian colleague Elizabeth May said this morning, not fully realizing how much Rotary was already in the leadership here in Winnipeg. And so I think I'm just going to, a couple of names, I don't have time to name everybody, but please know that those who are and have been so involved in building this and bringing us to this day, 5 times as we are today, Rotarians like David and Brenda Newman, Gary Senth, who is the chair of the Rotary Peacebuilding Committee, Maureen Brower, and other local members of Soka Gakkai, and Estelle. Estelle. Estelle sometimes tells me that we're sisters from a different mother. And it's been a great honor and pleasure to work with all that I have named and many more that I don't have time to name. But I also want to acknowledge that you wouldn't be here today without your teachers, without your professors, without your adult partners. And I want the younger people in this room to join me, please, just in a quick round of applause to say thank you to the teachers. And students, young leaders, where we have seen coming out of Winnipeg, coming out of this gathering, young leaders that I now see at the United Nations for meetings, that come to Ottawa for the Youth Parliament Nuclear Summit, which is also joined by many young people and other leaders online, since we do it as a hybrid. And we have Sarah today as the co-chair, also a member of my youth advisory for my senatorial office. Avinash, who also works as a youth advisor in my office, and Roj, who's not able to be here with us today, who are all stellar examples of what I just said. Starting in high school, finding a focus, keeping the focus, connecting in through the network. You've heard from Seth today from ICANN. You've heard from Raphael from the UN office. There's a lot of connecting that is in this room here today, and there's such a strong intergenerational coalition that we can continue to build on. And frankly, Winnipeg has to continue, Manitoba has to continue to be a leader, a primary leader in developing this, and we need to expand. It is so wonderful to have guests here, participants here, who are not from Manitoba, and we need to grow this beyond the physicality of this room, in this city, in this province. And so to do that, we do have facilitators like Seth, like Raphael, like all of you in this room, and we need to start thinking about how we change the fact that we're the only ones in this entire country doing this. You're the only students in this entire country, and those of you who care about this and work on this who weren't able to be with us today, you're the only ones in all of Canada that come together in this way and move out from here and continue to learn and to take action. So one of my suggestions that I want to make, and I hope you'll think about, what if we started to pair up with teachers and classes in other parts of Canada online? What if we started to build those relationships out even more, teacher to teacher, students to students, community leaders to community leaders? And you know, it might not evolve into what we have here, but there's a really good chance that if we share our knowledge and share our passion, that we can grow this and still have the amazing integrity and vision that this gathering represents every year. For example, the Youth Parliament Nuclear Summit that I convened for the first time a couple of years ago and reached out to other parliamentarians who joined me, both from the Senate and from the House of Commons, to welcome young people, many from Ottawa area. But, for example, this past year, we had Amelia, Madison, Sophia, with their teacher, Kathleen Elger, very much supported by their teacher, Kevin Lopuck. And that discussion about coming from Winnipeg to Ottawa to come to the Youth Parliament Nuclear Summit happened here. And more of this can happen. We have also the opportunity to continue to learn. The resources online are amazing. So let's take a closer look about what's actually happening in, for example, the first committee of the United Nations, headquartered in New York at the headquarters of the UN, where we see an emphasis on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons. And in many ways, this is a meeting ground that we've found because, and this gives me no pride to say this, as Elizabeth mentioned this morning, she's telling you the truth when she says that the government of Canada, not just this government of Canada, but the previous government of Canada and the government of Canada before that, does not involve, they don't want to and they don't involve themselves in dealing with this issue. When the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which is the only fully actualized legal treaty that deals with this issue, when it was being negotiated just a few years ago, Canada would not even send anyone into the room to observe, to report. I told you that I don't say that with any pride. I actually think it's a shame. And I also think that the only way to change that starts here. And starts with your local elected member of parliament and your not elected but appointed senators. They need to hear from young leaders in Manitoba. They need to know that actually you know way more than they do about this, and actually you can tell them what the opportunities are, starting from the incredibly simple step of Canada sending observers, official observers, into meetings like at the First Committee of the United Nations, like at some of the meetings that Raphael referred to when he was speaking. And in particular, looking forward to both April of 2026, when there will be more debate on the motions and the scientific study, that's another motion, very important motion, of the UN, of the impact of nuclear weapons, the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons, and building the evidence through the scientific research that has now been mandated by the UN, so that we're not in a position of just giving opinions, oh, this is scary and we want you to do something. No, no. You know more now, today, than the vast majority of parliamentarians in this country, and you need to teach them. They need to hear from you, and they need to know that you're watching them. And you need to talk to those who are voting that you know, and they need to convey that as well, or they need to deputize you to be able to go into those meetings and say to the parliamentarian, this is how my family feels. This is how my teachers feel. This is happening here, and you are not awake. And you know, you do that through constituency offices. Every single solitary member of parliament has a constituency office. And you don't accept no, and when they don't answer you the first time, you don't accept that. And this is how we will shift this debate in this country. This is how we will finally wake up the government of Canada to the need to engage in meaningful ways and to invest, because in 2024, the nuclear states, of which we are not one, but we participate. We allow, for example, nuclear submarines in Nanoose Bay in British Columbia, etc. We participate. And by refusing to engage in any way, yes, that's probably doing the will of the United States. And yes, not sending anyone to even observe is probably following through on pressure from NATO and the United States. But that's not the way Canada's government has always operated. We have a former prime minister, the son being Justin Trudeau, who took his personal time and traveled to NATO country after NATO country to talk to them and in fact successfully persuade them that it did not have to be a singular pro-nuclear policy and this crazy notion that NATO has that deterrence is when you go beyond the already 12,000 nuclear weapons. So, I mean, how many times can we kill ourselves? How many times can we destroy the planet? We have more than enough now. And in 2024, those countries spent more than $100 billion in 1 year on the escalation around nuclear weapons. And days ago, the United States president gave the green light for more nuclear testing. We've just heard what Casey and Raphael and Seth have been able to say to us about the implications of that. So that's how I'm going to end today, by saying I have complete confidence in every one of you in this room, and I have complete confidence that this is the way we turn this around. We're already leading in the country, we're already leading in the world, and now we have to get out and do even more, because we don't have the luxury of just sitting back and waiting. We don't have the luxury of putting our entire planet at risk. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention. I want to thank you for being here. And I want to say to you, you will make a difference. You are making a difference. And you have parliamentarians that will stand with you. And next, you're going to persuade even more parliamentarians that Canada has to change the way it's approaching the nuclear threat to humanity. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.